Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you are joining us. We are doing a special live recording. We're recording both on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll also be putting this, for those that are catching us live, we'll also be adding this to the RSS feed as well in an audio format, so that folks that didn't get a chance to join us tonight get a chance to catch up on what's going to be changing, which isn't a huge change. Don't get too much of a panic. There's not a big change coming, just some subtle changes that I wanted to talk about and share some information that I've been kind of waiting to really tell you about. And maybe some of you folks have been wondering, like, hey, we took a survey a while ago. Whatever happened to that? Well, I got some good news about that. So as my dog joins us also live, barking at pretty much everything he hears. So we'll do it. And this is the beauty of live, I guess, live without a net tonight here on Facebook and YouTube. So I wanted to share with you folks first, and I apologize for my voice. It's going away a little bit. I still think I've been a little hungover since St. Louis, and maybe the in and out of the air conditioning has kind of affected me as well. So I apologize for that. But there's some changes, like I said, that are coming to the podcast. We're going to shake things up a little bit. And I think after 2 years, we're starting to learn some things, and we're going to try to start applying some of those lessons. So I wanted to tell you about that. But first, let's talk about this survey. And I'll tell you the main thing that I got out of this survey that we put out in February. I believe it was 10, 15 questions. I forgot how many questions it was long. It wasn't a very long survey, but it did take some time to complete. And based on what I think the audience is and, the numbers I have, I was expecting 50, 75. No way. You guys blew it out of the water. 266 responses to the survey, which is just an absolutely amazing number. And the absolutely just outstanding. And the information that came back from that was just absolutely amazingly useful, and some really candid and honest feedback. I want to share some of it with you. I'm not going to get into all of it because we'd have a couple hour show going on tonight, and I don't want to keep you folks that long, but I do want to at least give you some of the neat things that came out of that survey before we get into what we've done with that information. 32.3% of listeners who took the survey heard of the podcast on social media. That was the majority, 32.3%. Well, who drives social media? That's you guys. You guys are the ones that are sharing the podcast. You like the posts, you share the episodes, you do all that. Absolutely amazing that you folks have been that important. And that's where growth of the podcast comes. And why is growth important? I mean, obviously we want more people listening to the podcast for the sake of the podcast, but I want people listening for the sake of the stories that we are able to tell. The more people we get involved, the more people get to hear about the folks that we have on the podcast, and their story just goes further, and it builds our network. And I'm sure that many people have been able to meet other folks through the power of the podcast. An amazing 61.7% of you listen every week. That's awesome. Glad to hear that we have a weekly podcast and it's being listened to by the majority of our listeners on a weekly basis. Now, I know life gets in the way, and there's a lot of podcasts that I don't get to catch weekly, and it's great. The beauty of a podcast is that you can listen anywhere, anytime. But the fact that you guys on the vast majority are still dedicated to listen to it every week is absolutely amazing. Only 2%, 2 people actually said they didn't listen at all. So hopefully they'll pick up an episode. They took the survey. Hopefully they'll also listen at some point. 85.7% of you listen to the entire episode. That's incredible. That's really incredible. I mean, there's a lot of content out there. And there's a lot of times that I don't even get the chance to watch through everything, but 85% of you say, almost 86% of you say you listen to the entire thing. That's really, really awesome. 47% said they have listened for 13 or more months, while 28% have listened for 7 to 12 months, which just tells me that the podcast, half of our audience is new, and it just continues to grow the audience. It's really good for the podcast. It's definitely good to hear. So, thank you for everybody who shares and tells people about the podcast, invites them to come join our family here. 31.9% of you listen in the car. 29.6% listen in the layout or the hobby room, which is where the podcast was designed. You know, the around the layout was really designed to be the podcast you listen to while you're around the layout. So that appreciate the 30% that have got that. But hey, listening in the car is awesome too. It keeps you entertained, and hopefully I'm keeping you entertained in between stops. So 4.8% of you do it while you're in the gym or exercising, and maybe I should join that percentage. So, but thank you everybody for the where you listen and sharing that. Neat age brackets. And this is really kind of close in numbers. 27.8% are between the ages of 55 to 64. 26.7 are between the ages of 45 to 54. And 19.9% are between the ages of 35 and 44. So that's really cool. We kind of know our age bracket. Love to get some younger folks involved. I mean, that's kind of, one of the missions of those that are within the NMRA and other organizations about getting youth involved. And it'd be great to get them involved in podcasting as well. I think it is a newer medium. I think it is a little bit, more technologically savvy kind of medium. So hopefully we can get some more younger folks listening to the podcast, but certainly appreciative of everybody at every age listening as well. As far as scales go, 68.9% HO scale, 17.3 N scale, 7.9% O scale, and 2.2% S scale. And then it falls off after that. And there's a couple Z scales that were chiming in as well. And I think some other off scales or ones that I didn't have in the list. So that's what we have a little bit for the survey, a little bit of that. Again, the feedback was amazing. And then the written feedback, there was a lot of folks say, hey, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. And I really do appreciate that. But really the meat came from the folks that gave that really candid, honest feedback. And it wasn't brutal. And I appreciate you guys not being brutal about it, but it was really excellent to hear. I certainly don't want to work in a vacuum, and I certainly don't want to assume things. I like to hear that feedback, and I've got a great group of friends that also gives me that feedback. And I appreciate even listeners send me an email, or if you saw me at a train show and you gave me that, I really appreciate that. And a lot of what you'll hear tonight came from not only my, what I call the council, the group that I surround myself with and talk most about the podcast, but from all types of listeners who gave feedback about specific shows or just in general, or, what they requested or what they want to hear. So I want to go to the slogan. You hear me say it at the beginning of every show. And I say it's where model railroaders come to tell their story. And when I started the podcast, that's kind of the idea, right? We had the around the layout idea. Okay, these are kind of the conversations and the things that you hear and talk about around the layout. But it was also about allowing a model railroader of all walks of life to be able to come on the show and tell their story. Because I believe everybody's got a story, and a lot of times everybody's got a great story to tell. And I think the podcast did very well with that. We had amazing amount of different people. We had people that you've heard of before and quite a few that you've probably never heard of before. And they came on, they got to tell their story and share that. And again, allow them the chance to talk and share their passion for the hobby. And again, as I learn more each episode, I started to notice something missing. In the survey and the responses really kind of highlighted that. There's a lot more than just the origin story. Now, the origin stories were really great because we heard people talk about the beginnings, and when you start to get to the end of their story, you start to be able to piece together, okay, this makes sense. Now I understand why they model what they do, because this is what they saw when they were a kid. This is what they fell in love with. And now, this all puzzle kind of ties together. So that was really great. But we also, with an hour podcast, we were completely missing things. And there were times where myself being a new podcaster, being a new interviewer, learning when to stop and drill into points. And boy, I listened to some of the old podcasts and I'm yelling at myself, like, just stop right there and ask them another question. And again, that's me learning as an interviewer. And I'm sure maybe some of you have listened to podcasts and just wish that I would ask that question too. Well, again, I'm learning, and it's just like anything else, just like the model railroading hobby, that you do it, you redo it, you try again, and you continue to learn. And that's what I'm doing here with the podcast as well. One of the biggest topics we left on the table was operations. Many guests would comment about not getting to it. They were like, I wanted to talk about ops. I didn't even get a chance to talk about my, how I run my layout. And for a lot of folks, that's a big part of what they're doing. It's the reason why they built their layout, the reason why they model, and now we need to get to it. So that's what we're going to be doing. So one of those guys that's extremely passionate about operations is my good friend, Don Iris. So you've heard us talking up Don. We've been doing a couple interviews lately that we've kind of mentioned what we're going to be doing. And what we're going to be doing is having Don on as a co-host, and he's going to be working with me to interview layout owners, maybe ones we've talked to already, maybe new podcast guests. There may be sometimes there'll be just Don and I talking about a particular topic, but we're going to have once a month a operations focused podcast. We've already have our first guest scheduled, and you can expect to see that show on the 13th of this coming month. So August 13th, we'll be having a guest on. We'll be interviewing them at the end of the week. We'll have that podcast ready to go. So you'll be hearing a new Talking Ops with Don Iris episode. And again, expect that monthly. We'll continue with what's happening in model railroading. It's been an awesome opportunity, not only to talk about with the manufacturers of our hobby. The last I checked, we need stuff, right? We need the stuff to be able to do the podcast. I mean, not the podcast, but the model railroad. We need supplies. We need the things that they build. So now we're going to continue that. And the other main thing about what's happening is the awesome opportunity to work with Tony Cook. Tony Cook is the encyclopedia of model railroading. And it is just amazing to have the opportunity to hear him talk about it, have him share his passion for the things that are happening in our hobby. So we are going to have Tony on, and we're going to continue the What's Happening episode. So you'll hear that still monthly. I think I keep seeing these comments. Let's get up and let's pull up a couple comments that have come out here. We'll say hello to a few folks here, and then we'll get back to my notes here, and we'll talk about some of the other changes that are happening. We'll start back in the beginning. Todd Armstrong says hello to myself and to the boys. Hello, John Garvin. Great to see you. Late Night Model Railroad is checking in. We're going to be talking to him later this week on Friday. He's participating in the operating crew giveaway. So thank you to Joey at Late Night Model Railroad for doing that. Illinois Midland Railroad stops by, says hello, and Scale Train Boy is checking in. He's out in Cape Cod, so he went right on through the Tri-State Railroaders territory. Mini Prince is checking in. Yeah, we're live and in person. Chris Robin is checking in. We are not pulling the pin. We are not shutting down. That is certainly not what's happening tonight. David, thank you. Good evening from the P&W. And then let's see who else we got. We have Floyd checking in tonight. We got Trackside Mike was just checking those guys out on their live. And good to see you again, Mike. Ted Diorio, who we will be hearing from tomorrow during our pod. He says that he listens while driving DoorDash during the week. So that's really cool. Glad we can keep you company while you're doing that. Steve 87th PSAP. Good to see you there. Our good friend Mark Herrick stopping by. Good to see you, Mark. Luke Robinson's checking in. Luke, good to see you. Thought I was young. Then I looked at the calendar, realized I was 37. Well, it doesn't get any better. Sorry to tell you that. Dundas Junction again. Good to see you. And let's see who else we've got here. Of course, Don Iris stopping by saying hello. We're just talking about Don. Looking forward to working with him. And Eric is checking in as well. Yeah, why do you not ask that question? That is a good question. So we're working on fixing that. And he also said operations is the big part and the number one reason I love model railroading. And we hear that a lot from folks. So we're going to address it. Dave Gardner, who's not a model railroader, but has been a big part of the Around the Layout success story, been a huge guidance for me on the podcasting side. Great to see Dave checking in. John Farrington, looking forward to this. Looking forward to getting John on here and talking about his operations more. We've had him on a couple times, but we're going to drill down on his ops. That'll be a lot of fun. So thank you to everybody. James McNabb also checking in. Good to see you, James. And thanks for checking in with us here. So let's get back to a little bit of the changes that are upcoming. And I turned the page too much on my notes. The other thing that we're going to be adding, and this is really kind of highlighted, and I want to thank the council around me, and especially Scott Thornton, who really drove home this point, and Scott's been a huge help for the podcast, is we're going to also add once a month a topic-driven podcast. So instead of the typical interview where we get a layout owner and we learn their story, we're going to take a selected topic and we're going to bring a person on who is very passionate about that topic, and we're going to talk about it. And coupled along with that is our new segment, the question of the month. And that's going to be, I think, a lot of fun. We've already done it. We did the first one. We asked, what commodity do you move the most on your layout? Where is it going? Where does it go? And why? And we had awesome responses to that. And you'll be hearing that tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll have Matthew Fricks on, who's talking about his passion for car routing. And really excited to have you folks hear that. And that'll be the start of a once a month topic driven podcast. Now, if you have a topic that you are very passionate about and you want to come on and tell us about it, again, reach out to us aroundthelayout@gmail.com, or you go to aroundthelayout.com/tell and you can fill out the form there. Tell us what the topic that you want to talk about is, and then we'll get in touch and we'll talk about it. And you could possibly be coming on the podcast to talk about that topic and have a question of the month sent out as well. Again, and let me just share real quick. Aroundthelayout.com/question is where you go to record your answer to the question of the month. It's very easy to do. You can do it on your phone. There's a record button. Just hit the record button. You talk, you leave the message, and yes, you can redo it and do it over again. And yes, you also have a 90-second limit. So try to limit your answer so that we can get through as many responses as possible on the podcast. So again, aroundthelayout.com/question, and looking forward to seeing what you folks have there to say. We'll also continue the Monday Rewind episodes. I think it's given new listeners an awesome opportunity to catch up on the podcast. Sometimes it's difficult to find old podcasts through the feed, so we bring some of them back to the surface. I think there's still great stories for people to hear. So again, we will continue those Rewind episodes. Some weeks you'll hear us drop in specials, events that are upcoming, or a special what's happening in model railroading. If we have a big news event that Tony and I would like to cover, we may drop that in on the Monday as well. If you have a model railroad event, you have a show, you have an RPM, you have anything that's a train related event that you would like to promote on the podcast, reach out aroundthelayout@gmail.com. We love to talk to folks about the upcoming events and promote them here. There's no charge for it. You just reach out to me. We set up a time, we record, I interview you about it. You get to tell us all about it, and hopefully reach the very responsive audience that we have here, and be able to promote your event there. So again, reach out to me aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Love to hear about your event. And of course, we're still going to be interviewing layout owners. That will not change. It's really what got the podcast to where it is now. I'm just so humbled and proud of what the podcast has become in a little over 2 years and just over 100 episodes. The amazing amount of support in this community should not surprise me, because it is the model railroading community, but it is still a very humbling experience to have folks come up to me at events and just say how much they enjoyed the podcast and loved hearing it. And of course, folks that have been on the podcast saying how they enjoyed the experience and want to come back. And again, trying to manage all of that as well and make sure that we're getting the people on that we want to hear from, and not letting anybody down. So balancing all that, but we will still be doing what we have done since the beginning, which is interviewing layout guests, but it's going to be done a little different. And again, 100 shows, I try to learn something new every interview. And I think that one of the things that we're really going to try to drill down on is what makes that person unique and what they're really passionate about. So we're going to try to break the format. I listen to these podcasts 2 or 3 times. I get to live the podcast, and I get to edit the podcast, and then I'll listen to it again just to make sure everything came out right. So on a release day, I'll listen to it again. And I knew there was a reoccurring theme. And I appreciate the folks that were brave enough, I guess, for lack of a better term, to point that out to me. But I was starting to get the idea. It needed to be freshened up. We need to take a little bit different approach, learn from the lessons that I've picked up through the podcast prior, and really drill down on that story. So I'm going to work on that, and I'm going to work on a little bit different. There's going to be a couple different ways. If you've been on the podcast before and you come back on again, you're going to notice some different things about the prep for the podcast. I really am passionate about putting out the best product I can do. And I hope that that's recognized. I just really want you folks to have something that you can really enjoy, you can listen to, that you're not yelling at the car radio for Ray to ask the right question. And hopefully I can start to pick up on the questions that everybody wants the most, and really give you a good, entertaining experience. So that's the changes that are coming to Around the Layout podcast. So expect to hear a topic related podcast. Expect to hear Don with Talking Ops with Don Iris, and more on operations. That's going to be a lot of fun. Continue to expect the What's Happening in Model Railroading episodes with Tony Cook. And we'll be talking to a lot of great manufacturers, from big manufacturers right down to the cottage industry folks and everybody in between. And then we'll also be interviewing layout owners. We'll be talking, freelance layouts. We'll be talking about, and it's all scales too. And I want to make sure that's clear too. You hear that 60 something % of the people are HO scale people. And it's only by that default that it seems that that's the network that we gain. But I want to talk to N scalers. I want to talk to O scalers. I want to talk to G scale. I mean, just amazing stuff. And again, if you're interested in coming on the podcast and sharing your story, please reach out aroundthelayout.com/tell, and we'll get you on the podcast and we'll get you to tell your story. So we'll go back through the comments one more time, and then we'll wrap it up here. Let's see what everybody else is. We'll go right here. Ted Diorio, Don is the man. Don is very passionate about ops. It's going to be an absolute blast. I mean, just having a lot of fun with the last couple episodes that we've done with him, and had a lot of great laughs, and I'm sure more of that will be coming. James McNabb, looking forward to this new format. Thank you very much. Let's see. More train related stuff is exactly what we're going for. So thank you, Joey. We'll be doing that. Trackside Mike, Tony, a good guy. Tony is an awesome guy. Again, very knowledgeable. Chris Palmieri, great to see you, my friend. And thank you for what you do for the hobby. And thank you for what you do for the podcast. A lot of folks are recommended by Chris, sent here through his vast network of freelancers. So when you start to hear a lot of freelancers, you can thank Chris Palmieri for that. Great to talk to those folks. Chuck Stansel checking in. Good to see you, Chuck. Tennessee Western Railway. Yeah, very exciting times. I'm sorry I missed you in St. Louis. I did see you from a distance and then you disappeared and I didn't catch up to you. But thanks for checking in here tonight. Our good friends from Second Section Podcast. Love the show. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Thank you for what you guys do. It's always great. It's an awesome working relationship, and they've been a great sounding board as well. My car ride with Mike Ostertag, truck ride, I should say, in his pickup down in St. Louis provided a lot of laughs and a lot of great things. Dave Gardner is apparently responsible for parts of the people that listen at the gym, and I know he's got his Around the Layout podcast shirt that he works out at the gym. And I think he's gotten better results from wearing the shirt. So congratulations, Dave, on all that hard work, and glad the shirt can contribute. Fall River Division. Good to see you, John Parker. And thanks for stopping by. Paul, who's been on the show. Yeah, we all love ops and great. And we're going to get you back on here and we're going to talk ops as well. So it'll be great to hear from you again as well. I listen while piloting 40 tons down the highway. Over the road truck driver. Chris, thank you very much. And appreciate you listening to the podcast while you're watching those dotted lines go past the windshield. So appreciate you for that. Ops is tops for sure. Thank you, Barry. Robert, thanks for checking in with us. Yeah, and John is another guy. I mean, obviously, his Fall River Division's an amazing layout that I need to get out and see someday. So it'd be great to be talking to you. I can't thank Matt Forkham enough. Folks, if you see our new website, aroundthelayout.com, and the changes that have been made to it, if you haven't, please take a moment right now. Go to aroundthelayout.com and take a poke around. And Matt is the guy to thank. He took that project head on and did an absolutely outstanding job with it. And I'm still picking at him about technical things on there, and he's been able to help me every single time. So, Matt, thank you so much for all your help and getting the website up to date. A lot of pictures, all that is all now on the website. Every single episode has its own page. So, example, tomorrow's podcast will be aroundthelayout.com/112. All of that thanks to Matt Forkham and the work he has done. So I'd like to run a little longer. Just when it starts to get the go, it is clipped at 1 hour, maybe 90 minutes. Again, a lot of feedback on that. I would love to go longer, but it seems like hour is a sweet spot for a lot of folks. It's that trip to and from work that's about an hour. So we run a little over sometimes. We'll go the hour 10, hour 20, but that hour just seems to be the sweet spot. But I do appreciate you wanting a little bit more, and that's when we get folks back on the podcast and have them on again. So appreciate that feedback. And yep, Don, exciting changes. Looking forward to all of that. And on. You guys have some really great comments in here. Sorry, I had to turn them down a little bit. Sammy Carlisle, he's got ATLP 2022, the HO scale car out there. And I did see somebody hinting that the changes were that I bought an actual box car and have that out on the rails. I do not. We have the, it's hard enough to manage the HO one and the N scale one. Over 110 stops now scheduled for the HO car. If you have submitted, just be patient. It takes a little while to get it around, but it will come to you. There's no time limit on this thing. It's an open-ended tour. And right now, again, in Oklahoma, then heading to Texas, and then we'll figure out where it's going. And then Trackside Mike, he ordered the decals to make his own ATLP car. You can do that right on highballgraphics.com. If you look on the left-hand side, you'll see Around the Layout podcast listed as one of the roads offerings. So you can do build your own. You can even do something that's not a box car and use those decals for it. So just make sure you share all of the pictures of anything that you do. And of course, if you get the car, we're going to be looking for pictures. So, and yes, it is coming to Canada. It's going to Switzerland. It's going to the UK. It's going obviously to Australia and then over to New Zealand. It's got a long way to go. And the N scale car is picking up traction as well. So that's going to be definitely seeing a lot of spots. So whether you're HO or N, get yourself signed up aroundthelayout.com/2022. So that's about it for me tonight. I want to thank everybody who has helped support the podcast. Obviously, the folks that have supported the podcast with the operating crew. If you are not a member of the operating crew, $3 a month help support the podcast. It gets you in the Patreon page where we share previews to upcoming shows. And it also gets you entered to win our monthly drawings. This month, we'll be giving away a kit from Late Night Hobbies in Late Night Model Railroad. It is an absolutely awesome kit. I love them. I loved in building the one I got. I've actually got two, and hopefully a third one will be released fairly soon that I'll be looking to get as well. So awesome stuff. Really appreciate all you folks. Really appreciate you sharing and supporting the podcast. Thanks for joining us live tonight. And if you're listening to it in the RSS feed, again, thank you so much. And we'll be talking to you soon. Have a great night.